So
Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Hurry up and watch me fall.
okay, here we go. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of Look, Mum, I'm Failing, the podcast that brings together a seemingly unexpected duo, one a full-time professional performing or creative artist, and the other a business owner or leader, in search of common themes and ways to endure and maybe even enjoy the process of failure. I'm your host, Sam McNeil, General Manager of Song Division, speaker, MC, facilitator, connector, singer, wannabe comedian, human hurricane, and a man that just oozes talent and charisma. I have to say that. It's in the script. Bring it up with my scriptwriter. I've got another amazing couple of guests for you this week. Duncan Fisher grew up as a competitive gymnast, professional acrobat, before going behind the curtain and becoming Global Chief Show Operating Officer at Cirque du Soleil. You might have heard of them. He's now working with Universal Circus and is an in-demand corporate keynote speaker. Neil Jones is a guitarist who spent the last 20 years touring, recording, and writing with the great Kim Wilde. Among other incredible credits, he's headlined Glastonbury with Cee-Lo Green and toured with and recorded with global names like Sophie Ellis Bextor and Rick Astley. He's also someone I consider a friend, and he's been working with Song Division for, I want to say, 12 years plus. Neil, Duncan, hello, thank you. How are you?
All good, all good. Happy to be here, Sam. I was just, we were chatting before this started that it feels like it's been a while, isn't it? It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. Yeah. Thank you for joining, Duncan. You're in the US. I appreciate it. I'm going to start with you, actually, Duncan. For both of you, but we'll start with Duncan. This sort of your origin story. I've done my stalking online. You've grown up in Leeds. How early did you discover this passion for, I guess, athletics in general, but gymnastics, it sounds like you began with. And from that point, how long was that journey to be doing it full-time, professionally and competitively?
Yeah, sure. And great to be with you. I'm actually in Canada. I live in Montreal.
You're in Montreal. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. How embarrassing. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
Because we met in Las Vegas originally.
We did.
That's
we
the
met
confusion.
in Las Vegas. That's right. But both very well traveled. So, going back to when I was basically 7 years old, my mom was a teacher at the school where I went to, and one of her colleagues decided that they were going to have start a gymnastics class. So my mom volunteered me to be one of the first participants to get in there, so that at least they had somebody in the class. Anyway, it turned out that I was not half bad at it, and was quite quickly spotted at a gymnastics competition by the guys who were running the what was at the time called Leeds Athletic Institute, and which was the hub for elite sports in Leeds. And I started training there from being probably 9 or 10 years old, and became Yorkshire champion when I was 13, 14, got into the junior British team at that time, going down to the national training centres, doing squad trainings and the junior international competitions.
Awesome.
I was training for the Commonwealth Games, and somebody came to me, a friend of mine. He was actually coaching me at the time. He's about 4 or 5 years older than me. And he came to me and said, hey, I've been working with this acrobatic act, and we were 5 of us doing this comedy tumbling act, and we need somebody because one of the guys is leaving. Would you be interested in doing it? I'm like, well, what does it involve? He said, basically going to Madrid for the next 9 months. I was like, well, that sounds interesting, because, back in the 80s, there was no money in gymnastics. Like, if you wanted to be in the international senior teams, you were basically on the dole training every day. That's how it worked. So when somebody said, do you want to keep doing this and actually get paid for being an acrobat? Well, let's say I literally jumped at the chance. And off I went to Spain to work in a cabaret. And then we did casinos. The first big show, I'm going to call it big show, I did was in Christmas 1989. Pantomime with Cannonball, Christopher Biggins, Bernadette Nolan. It was the biggest panto in the UK at the time, and I had such a good time hanging out with those guys and working on that. And we did 12 weeks at the Birmingham Hippodrome. It was the best show, still the best show I've ever done. And then after that,
I remember Cannonball on TV as a kid, so I remember how massive that was. That's incredible.
They were huge. I mean, we're talking about, the late 80s. They were the biggest duo in comedy at the time. And Bobby Ball was a hoot. We went out. He had this minder called Trevor. I'll never forget. And we went out, the three of us, and had a whale of a time. And it was and Bernadette Nolan was a dream to be around, and her sisters were always hanging around, and we were all partying. It was very, very cool situation for somebody who was like 19 years old,
I was going to say, what an amazing opportunity at that age. It probably was what made you, really want to do that. Going from like you said, going from a place of working hard for imagine next to no money, that amateur gymnastic world, I could imagine is very difficult to go. And it's a bit similar to me with Song Division. I just finished my opera degree, was doing amateur opera, paying to be in them, not just not getting paid, paying to be involved. And and he's like, hey, do you want to start doing this stuff where you travel around the world and get paid to make people happy? I was like, that sounds way more fun.
Way more fun. And then shortly after the panto, we got a contract for a circus, and none of us had really done circus before, but we got a contract for a circus in the US, and nobody had ever heard of it. It was called the Tarzan Zerbini International Circus, and we ended up going there. We were supposed to go on a 9-month contract. That was now like 1991, and I've never left.
Amazing. That's really cool. All right, well, we'll jump back into that. Neil, I should know this better than I do. We met in I think we met in Vegas too, or had we met before that? Gosh,
I think you're right. I think it might have been Vegas.
That fateful week at IMEX.
Yeah.
Goodness me. But take us back even further. You don't age, by the way. So you've been doing Kim Wilde for 20 years. So you've obviously started when you were 10.
That's it.
When did it all? Yeah, you're a gorgeous guitarist. When did you realize this? I have the skills and potential ability to do it for a living. And then how long did that take to come to life?
Well, I mean, just to sort of talk a little bit about that thing that Duncan kind of mentioned with was you said your mum kind of helped you get that into gymnastics. I think that's such an important thing, because it made me think of that thing. I remember someone said, what would have happened to Tiger Woods if no one had put a golf club in his hand? It's that thing of when you're young, unless you try lots of things, how do you know what your calling is? And I think that's where some of us are fortunate that we happen to have found the thing that really spoke to us. And I grew up in a super crazy musical household, and this is because I've got quite a mix, if you're ready for this, as a bloodline. My dad is so he's the Jones side of it, obviously, and his father was Welsh, but he grew up in Norfolk, blonde hair, blue-eyed Welshman. And then my mum is from Trinidad in the Caribbean. She's Indo-Caribbean. So with those two, I mean, there's no polar opposites more, I think, than this in terms of musical taste. So I had everything from calypso, Bob Marley from mum's side. It was also massively into classical music as well. That was something that she loved from a child. And then on my dad's side, it was Gary Moore, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton. He was into his blues, Muddy Waters, all that kind of stuff. So there was so much music in the house of all different sides. And the funny thing was, my mum would spoil me, but my dad he was not that guy. He wouldn't spoil me at all. The only soft spot my father had was for music, because he played a bit of drums himself, and he was actually in a band called the Bootleg Beatles. No, not the Bootleg Beatles.
I was going to say, I know those guys.
It was that. Wow, I'm trying to remember. It will come back to me. It's the Bootleg something. But yeah, he was. They actually ended up supporting the Animals back in the day on a short tour. But he became a journalist. That's a whole other story. But he bought me my first guitar. Now, I remember the particular time, because we were sat down watching Top of the Pops together back when that was a thing. And I remember watching Gary Moore when he was in Phil Lynnott's band, and this was before he left and did his own thing. And I remember watching them play and thinking, I said to my dad, I really fancy learning the electric guitar. And the very next day, he ordered me one. And bearing in mind, as you know, I'm a left-hander, so even back then they weren't easy to find. And I picked it up and I played it, and I thought, I'm so terrified, as my dad never spoilt me with anything, of not at least showing him I can play something, that I learnt the electric guitar, purely out of fear for like the first month, because I just thought he's going to kill me if I don't learn this thing. Needless to say, 2-3 weeks into it, I was completely hooked. And then, went on to study music, and then into my early 20s. And I guess that moment that we're talking about, when things started to happen, and again, they always say there's right place, right time. There's an element of luck, but you've got to be in those places for these things to happen. So there's always an element of that too. I was playing in a club, and it was with a originals band at the time. And there was this guy who was watching me play, and he came up to me at the end of the night, and I was packing all my gear away. And this guy was incredibly drunk, and it was at that stage where I was like wrapping my cables up, putting my guitar away, getting ready to lift my heavy amp back into the car. And this guy has come over to me. Oh, I'm a producer, and he's spilling his beer on my shoes. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, of course you are. Of course you're a producer. and I've heard this before, and it's like, you're very drunk. You want to chat? It's fine. And anyway, he said to me, here's my card. Can you give me a call? And I said, no problem at all. And then I did drop him a text and said, nice to meet you the other night. Forgot about it. Didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And then I got a call back from this guy. And he said, I hope you remember me. I'm really sorry I was so drunk the other night, but I do remember you playing. And I'd like to get you to come down to our studio, which happened to not be too far from where I lived. And he said, I'd like you to record on some tracks that we're doing. Which then turned out to be for a band called Bewitched, who, if you remember them, the 4-piece Irish girl band that did, Blame It on the Weatherman, and they had a load of hits.
They were big in Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember Bewitched from when I was living in Oz.
Yeah, they had a good run here too. So, and I still speak to Lindsay actually from Bewitched. But yeah, so that ended up getting onto some demo tracks for that. And then once I did a good job for Andy, he invited me back to do more studio sessions, and then word got around and I ended up doing more studio work. And that was kind of the catalyst for how things started for me. But the kind of the big thing for me was I always wanted to be a live guitarist. I didn't like the pressure of working in a studio that much with the red light and the producer watching their clock all the time.
Right.
And that would come later, but yeah. That's initially how I got in.
I picture you as a guy who loves being in the studio, perfecting the sound and getting the take right. But I've got that wrong.
No, you haven't. I'm absolutely that guy. The only difference is when you're on someone else's time, and they're on the clock, and they don't want 6 takes. They want 1 or 2 takes of the perfect thing, and that's it. It's getting stamped to the record. I think that takes a certain type of person to be, to enjoy that, Whereas I like doing exactly as you said, but in my own studio until 2 in the morning at my own pace. Yeah,
it's a lot of pressure, isn't there? Duncan, coming back to you again, and some of this research could be wrong, so correct me. But you sort of hung up the proverbial gloves at early 24ish to move from being on the stage to behind the stage and going into events and event management and show management. Is that correct? And was that because that's sort of the lifespan of a male gymnast, or was it an injury, or had you just had enough of that physical side of it? Talk to us about that pivot.
Yes, that is correct. I was 25 when I stopped performing, and no, it wasn't even a plan or an injury, or it was more about, again, Neil, you just mentioned it, being in the right place at the right time with the right opportunity. And
right.
I've even sort of written about this in some of my writings, the surface area of luck, right? Which has 2 axes. One is how good you are, and the other one is how much you promote yourself and get to know
Yep.
people and network. And the better you are and the more people that you can, get to know who you are, you build this bigger surface area that luck can land in. And,
Love that. I love that.
that it's absolutely true. You need to do both to get anywhere. And, as I mentioned, we first landed in the US with the Tarzan Zabini show, which was lions and tigers and bears and spit and sawdust and the kind of place where everybody did everything. It had nothing to do with the Cirque du Soleil of today. And it was, it's called traditional circus. It was a real family style traditional circus. And we basically, the first day that we were there, Tarzan said, "You guys want to make some extra money?" And, I got there, I'm 20 years old, I'm broke. Of course, I want to make some extra money. So my first job was loading the seats into the back of the truck as we moved from city to city. And then, I started learning how to put up the big top tent. And probably it was only about 6 months after that, I was in charge of putting up the big top tent. And after a couple of years, I was responsible for the whole transfer from one city to the next. I was doing the planning, running the crews, really leaning into that. And we moved at an exceptionally fast pace for a circus. To give you an idea, a Cirque du Soleil show that's in a big top moves 6 times a year. Those big shows like Alegria and Cusa, they're going to play 100 cities over their lifetime of 20 years of shows, And with Tarzan, we actually moved twice a week.
Physically moving the whole show.
Physically moving.
And everything, yeah, right.
2,400 seats and a big top twice a week. And over 3 or 4 years, I moved that thing about 200 times. So I had this like crash course in moving a circus down the road. And it was 1995 now that it was actually the Universal Circus that I'm working with now. They approached me because they were about to create their show. They had no idea about circus, the group of people that put it together. They came from the music industry. The founder is actually from Motown. He was with Lionel Richie and the Commodores, and he promoted Michael when he was still with the Jackson 5.
Wow,
cool. So they had no idea about circus, but they wanted to make a circus that was for the African American community and would go into the inner cities and perform for in an urban culture setting. And I set I was the first one to put a circus tent in Harlem. I set the tent up in West Philadelphia, in South Chicago. When they called me, they said, "Well, we would love you to come and run the operations, but we don't need you to perform. Thank you very much." So I had this decision to make. Did I want to continue to perform and do what I was doing, or did I want to take this opportunity to lean into the management, the sort of the operational aspect of the business? And I decided to do that at the time. So I stepped away for an opportunity, not because I was hurt or any other reason. I can still do a backflip.
I bet you can. You also, and I met you. You're still a very fit, healthy-looking human, and I suggest you probably, there is a physical clock, I guess, on the work you would have been doing on stage. So you probably made a great decision based on your work with, you've been at C2, Cavalia.
Yeah.
Obviously Cirque du Soleil, which I'm really excited to poke behind the curtain, pardon the pun there, a little bit as well. Neil, talk to your own work, and we talked about this before we went live, like people like Kim and Rick, who are having huge longevity, great careers, only getting more and more popular, it seems. And the same with you. Like, what is the secret behind? Gosh, being especially a session musician as well, like longevity, continued success, whatever that means to you, but consistent work. What do you think the keys behind that were, and what have been some particularly really proud moments that for you over the last 2 to 3 decades?
Um, it's tricky because I can't speak for the artists themselves, but
Yeah.
from an objective point of view, as the person who stands just behind them to one side, I think ultimately the thing that keeps them driven to do this is a passion for what they do. You know, you've got to, because there are still artists out there that, you know, I'm not going to name, that aren't particularly passionate about it anymore,
Phoning it in
and
a little bit.
yeah, just it's, you know, they're sort of going through it, but there's not really maybe a connection so much with the audience. I
Mm,
mean, someone like Kim, literally every single audience that we go and play to, you know, her and her brother Rick, who, you know, is a big part of the writing and production. You know, he's the real man behind it all. Every single audience we play to, what of our songs were hits here? Tell me how to connect with these people. If we're playing somewhere where English isn't the first language, the first thing Kim will do is learn how to say, "Hi, everyone, how are you?" in that language. There's a real effort that's made to try and form a connection. And Kim's great at that. You know, she comes across as a very endearing person to her audiences, but ultimately her and her brother are always to the point where it's almost irritating listening to music. they're
yeah.
always It's always turning, they're always listening to new stuff as well as the old stuff. And it's that drive for it. But you know, this kind of goes back to that same old thing again of, it's music's a part of it, but it's not everything, especially when it comes to, you know, like Duncan said, logistics and all the other parts that move, as I guess our equivalent is a tour manager would do, sort of similar to some of the logistical things that
Yeah.
Duncan
And
was
you
doing.
and you quite enjoy that tour manager role, don't you?
Well, I
Well,
don't do it
maybe
anymore. I
you
did it.
do
I
you,
did
you
it
did
for
it
about
well.
3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good because I always wanted to get an understanding of the industry from all the different sides, and every time there's an opportunity to understand it from a different angle, and that's more the business and logistics side as a tour manager, to a musician side, it's only going to make you better at what you do. And as I said, that whole thing of music being a part of it, it is one part of it, but for instance, I know some amazing musicians that don't end up touring for very long because they might not be great people to be stuck on a bus with for 6 weeks or longer. You know, it's music's a part of it. How good you are as a musician is a part, but it's not this overwhelmingly large percentage. Can you get along with people? Can you mitigate problems and curveballs when they come along? How flexible? There's just so much to it, and I'm sure there are clearly parallels between what I do and what Duncan does here.
Definitely.
And in fact, one of the best, I've got to say this saying because I thought this is probably the most applicable place to say it. When I was actually way back when I was at music college in London, I went to the Musicians Institute in Wapping, and which is sadly no longer there. It's still in LA, MI, it's called Musicians Institute. And we used to have guests come in quite frequently. We had like legendary jazz drummers like Billy Cobham and guitarists like Tony McAlpine. We had all these incredible musicians there. And there was this one session guitarist that came in of no name. No one knew who he was, but he was just one of those background guys, just like I am now, that not necessarily many people would know about. And he was really down to earth, really approachable. And there's one thing he said just at the end of his kind of clinic that absolutely stuck with me. And he said, I said to him, "Look, can you summarize what being a session musician is?" And he said, "I can summarize it with three things." He said, "You've got to be an acrobat, a diplomat, and a doormat." And I thought that has stuck with me forever because he nailed all three of those things in equal parts. I think in terms of what goes on with the job. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it should be all creatives or performers like the both of you are. There should be a responsibility to even if you don't need to do it, understand what's going on in the background to put on a show or a tour. At least be conscious of it, because then you at least appreciate a lot of the people behind the scenes, the unsung heroes, and you're probably more willing yourself to understand when and if things go wrong. I imagine there are some some famous performers out there who are completely kept away from what it actually takes to put on a world tour, and have no concept of just how difficult it is, and maybe lack a little bit of that respect and gratitude for those people. That's just what I imagine, but I've got nothing to base that on. I want to talk about big productions. We'll start with you again, Duncan, and then Neil. I want to talk about some of your big, Glastonbury, for example, because I know there's quite a funny story behind that. Cirque, Duncan. It's just it's a beast like no other, isn't it? And what does that chief? Am I getting it right? It's like the global chief show operations officer. So is that's the? You tell us what does that role day to day, and just how massive and epic is Cirque?
Yeah, well, Cirque is really one of a kind. It is it's really one of the only companies in the world that does the business from soup to nuts, where they create their own IP, and then we distribute our own IP. We promote our own IP. Everything is done in-house. You look at a Live Nation and AEG, they're promoting other people's stuff, right? They're not creating stuff.
The artist,
there's Disney and Feld Entertainment who do, but Cirque is probably doing more tickets on an annual basis than them for the touring shows, theme parks and stuff. But so it's a company that is very unique in that respect. They obviously reinvented what circus was by, turning the into theater, and making it a spectacle rather than a curiosity. Did away with the animals and replaced that with incredible costumes, incredible set pieces, theatrical works, dance pieces, live musicians in every show. So really reinvented what circus was, and obviously blew up into this company that had shows all over the world. So when I took a position at Cirque, which was in 2018, I went there to run the operations of the touring show division. So I was basically taking charge of not just the biggest touring operation in circus, but basically in the whole of entertainment, because I had at the time anywhere between 15 and 20 shows around the world. What you may not know is that Cirque du Soleil also owns the Blue Man Group, also owns a company called V-Star that we were running Paw Patrol and Trolls, Baby Shark shows. They own the company called The Works, which has the property called The Illusionists. So I had the core Cirque du Soleil shows, but I also had 3 Blue Man tours. I had 2 Paw Patrol tours. I had all this that I was running as well. So, and any one of those shows, like a Cirque du Soleil Big Top show, you're talking about 130 employees on the road, plus probably another 50, 60 family members that are traveling with the show. So you got a couple of hundred people on the road on just one show. And we had, 15, 20 shows that were out there. So when I took the job at Cirque, I was responsible for the operations of the touring show division. After COVID, when that obviously changed the whole world of entertainment, and we can come back to the that whole thing. But I started getting involved with the marketing side of things after COVID, and became the president of the touring show division. So that was the first time that I owned the P&L of a business, and quite a sizable one, running all the touring shows and running the marketing, the ticket sales, and the operational side as well. And then just about a year and a half ago, it was decided that the 2 units at Cirque would merge. We have the touring shows and the resident shows.
Yeah.
The resident shows being the Vegas shows, Orlando, in a theater that never moves. And they were really run as 2 very separate businesses. The touring side had a P&L, the resident side had a P&L. And it was decided to merge them together And it just so happened that my background was operational, and my counterpart at the resident shows, his background was marketing and ticketing. So it was like, okay, Mike, you're going to do the marketing and ticketing for all the shows globally. And Duncan, you're going to do the operational stuff for all the shows globally. So we split it up like that. So it was about 18 months ago now and I took over all the shows in Las Vegas, in Orlando. So as my job as chief show operations officer was running every show that Cirque du Soleil produced. So that was super cool, taking on the shows in Vegas as well, and looking after the theater side of things as well as looking after the touring side of things.
Yeah. We don't spend too much time on this. Seems like an interesting decision, though. Like two very different business models, right? The residency and the touring show, and what's expected and the pressures, I'd imagine, are quite unique in their own right.
Yeah, what you have is basically some very similar things, but then you have a whole list of stuff that the touring shows that the resident side doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Constant risk assessments, I imagine, like just the constant changing of those. When you're in a residency, you sort that out, and then that's that one and done kind of thing.
That's it. It either works or it doesn't work, right? With a residency, basically.
Yeah.
But the marketing is very different. But at the same time, there are so many similarities at the management level that we felt that having a marketing team for the touring side and a marketing team for the resident side could be combined to a certain extent.
That can make sense, I guess.
The same with the financial people, the HR people. So it was really the back office stuff that was all combined together. The shows themselves didn't change. The operations on the shows didn't change. Yeah. It was really merging the marketing and the back office stuff to not have two separate entities doing that.
I see. Yeah, it's amazing though. What an operation.
Just off the back of that, actually, I was going to ask. At the minute, in my head, as I'm trying to visualize all this, Duncan, I can just see a picture of you with maybe like 7 phones all ringing at once in front of you. How big is your sort of team that you're working with? Just out of interest.
So Cirque du Soleil currently has around 4,000 employees. Oh, so wow, okay. I had about 3,200 performers. Right. Yeah, including performers. Yeah. I had about 3,200 of them reporting into me. Wow. So the way that I operated and the way that it was set up coming out of COVID was really all about empowering people out on the road. There is no way that you can be a chess master and decide what's happening in Madrid today, in Tokyo tomorrow, and Melbourne tonight, and because the sun never sets on the Cirque du Soleil shows, right? They are continually going on all around the world, all around the clock. So you have to trust the people that you put in place. So, the tour director position, which is, I think it's a little more of a job than a tour manager role in a concert. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the scope of what they have to deal with by moving their own venue as well. When you're talking about a big top 10 on the road, it's a lot of staff, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of equipment. So those people are a key to what's going on. And then at the head office, it wasn't a huge team. I had a head of operations, I had a head of strategy, I had a marketing. And we made sure that the communication between the head office and the road was the thing that we focused on the most. Like I would have 2 calls a day. We called them the huddles. One in the morning, one at the end of the day, Eastern time. So people who were on the right time zone could dial in the morning. People who were on the other time zone would come in the afternoon. And it's really just, hi, how you doing? What are you up to? Do you need anything? Did anything interesting happen? Anything bad happen? Just to make sure we were all connected and people out on the road were not feeling isolated or that they had to do things by themselves. And also, it enabled the tour directors of the shows to communicate as well, because we got to the point where the shows are helping each other. Hey, I need a rigger. I've got my rigger's sick. Can you give me one for a week? Hey, I'm going to be short for this. I need that. And so we had the shows helping each other as That's well really nice. as trying to, hey, the last time you were in Tokyo, what happened with so and so? Oh yeah, you got to do this, And
Yeah. Well, it's
so
building
we
that
really made
team
sure that it was all
cohesion.
about empowerment and all about communication between the teams.
That's such a nice takeaway because, yeah, you can be the CEO of a company with 40,000 employees. That doesn't mean you're responsible for them all. I think that the great organizations, they find the right people, put them in the right position, and then let them do their job and empower them.
It's exactly the same on my side of things, and it totally strikes a chord with me when you said about the trusting people to do their job, not micromanaging people, but saying, I trust you. There's a long leash. Don't hang yourself. Go and I don't want to hear from you now. I know you can do your job. Come back to me if you need help solving something. Yeah, that's
exactly
100% the key to that well-oiled machine on the music side as well, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Shout out.
The key to that is accountability, right? You can't just say, "Here's the keys to the car," go off and slam it into a lamppost. So it's really setting the parameters of what I expect, and then as you said, if you need help, give me a call. If you're not meeting expectations, I'm going to give you a call. Everything else is okay,
Everything else is good. Yeah, I love that. Shout out to Andy Sharp, who is a big supporter of that philosophy. Gives me a lot of empowerment. Lets me make decisions. Lets me make mistakes. Nothing catastrophic. Obviously, he's there when I need him. We have our daily huddles. Podcast powered by Song Division. Connect your people using the power of music and songwriting. Shameless plug. Neil. Biggest, we're talking about big productions. I mentioned Glastonbury as such an interesting story that I love that what you tell about that performance. Is that probably the biggest production show you've done, or what's been up there on those kind of levels of crowd size?
I mean,
event scale.
There are. It depends how you scale production.
True,
I mean, I've been on things that are bigger productions as a whole in terms of a big moving production. Glastonbury, obviously, everything's out of our hands. You're turning up as an act. It's very much their production, and they've got their own stage managers, and everything's being done. A lot of it's taken care of. But the interesting thing about that particular thing was, obviously, for just about every musician, especially any session musician, it's a bucket list item, isn't it? We want to do Glastonbury. And I remember, I think that. Well, let's start from the rehearsal. So we had. So
it's Cee-Lo Green, and
we got the call
to see him at some point.
Yeah, and he'd unfortunately had a really rough Coachella. I think it was like a month before, where everything went wrong for him and his band. It was really quite upsetting.
His American band.
Yeah, his American band. And then we got the call. He's coming to the UK. He's going to be doing Glastonbury. You guys are going to be playing for him, and we're going to have 2 weeks of rehearsal in London. So we show up for that, and obviously I always am. This is just me. I'm always the most prepared guy in the room, and I'm always the first one there.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that with Song Division.
Yeah, I wanted absolutely no flies on me policy, but so we turn up and. For the first, I'd say 2-3 days, we're working through the stuff, and then our next question was when's Cee-Lo arriving? Because obviously we want to start getting rehearsed with him. We got a 2-week run. It's like that's plenty of time, and we're told initially he's going to be there for the second of those 2 weeks. And the reason for that was because he was a judge at the time. He was contracted judge on The Voice, and I think it was him, Christina Aguilera, and someone else were judges. So we knew then that it was like, okay, in many ways there was a little bit of pressure off. Let's just really tie things up. But it would be this thing at the end of the rehearsal. It would be recorded. It would be sent to him, and then in the morning we'd all arrive, and there'd be a list of notes from Cee-Lo. And interestingly, this was when he was promoting the Wildflower record, which had Forget You, and Bright Lights, and all the hits he was having at the time. And it's quite a Motowny record, it's got that kind of vibe to it. We loved it, and we rehearsed it as such, because as session musicians, you're trying to represent that, that sound and that album. With that extra excitement of live music, and the notes were constantly coming back. I want it rockier. I want it rockier. So we're like, okay, we'll keep upping it and giving it more energy, and but turning the guitar gains up a little bit, and which was all great. Anyway, we now get to this point where we're 2 or 3 days out from being at the end of rehearsals. There's still no Cee-Lo. And then on that last day, we're told, every day we're told he'll be here tomorrow, we'll be here tomorrow. Of course, he never shows up. He never makes it to a single rehearsal. And then your mind's starting to run
notes,
away.
By the way, I love he's actually sending
yeah.
notes though. He's listening.
He's listening. He's listening to the whole playback and sending notes about what he wants to change. So it gets to, you know, we're happy. We're playing exactly what's being asked of us, and everything's. He was happy with the final recording. So it gets to Glastonbury, and we get there very early in the morning. Well, I say early in the morning. It was like, I don't know, 7, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
But it's. If you've ever strolled onto Glastonbury or driven in, it's incredible. Like there's just tents everywhere. Obviously, some people that haven't gone to sleep, and it was one of those It was one of those years where it was a real muddy washout. You either had blazing sun or you had just mud, and it was a muddy one. And that was one of those things where I thought, I'm too old to be a festival goer now. I don't want to be in all of that. Like.
I had my first Glastonbury last year, and thank God the weather was good because I'm thinking I'm getting too old for that.
Yeah, I did start to realise I was getting of that age. But we get to the sound check because we're headlining. We get to sound check first because you sound check in reverse order. And so we get to sound check, and then we find out there's no Cee-Lo for sound check, which we're like, okay, well, let's at least make sure everything's good. So we do the sound check. It then comes to the stage time, which was, we went on pretty late being the headline. It was close to 11 p.m. And I remember the stage manager at the BBC just saying, right, guys, get ready to go on. I'm like, we still haven't met this guy. Like, we've got this is really strange. I've never had this in my whole career. And I see him suddenly rush into a dressing room just out of sight. And we're then all on this ramp ready to go on stage. Chase and Status were on just before us and absolutely lit the crowd up.
Oh, my God.
The pressure was just, we were all feeling that. And one of the things I remember actually was just as he was standing next to I could just hear him talking to the stage manager, but he was too far away to like come say hello to us. But he was chatting to the stage manager, and the stage manager said, listen, this is the BBC. If you can, I know your biggest song is Forget You, and I know the original song is not Forget You, it's something else. Please, can we keep it as PC as possible? I remember hearing that before we walked on stage. I'll circle back to that. So his walk-on music starts, and they're like, go. So we go on, and we open with War Pigs, I think it was. So, you know, big chords. Bob starts off. And this is where, these are the times when you earn your money as a session musician, because our monitor engineer had a meltdown. His gear stopped working, and he was just rabbit caught in headlights. And we could, because we looked at him, and I was like, I can't hear drums. Drums can't hear me. Drums and I are starting. This is Bob Knight and I. We're starting the track. And we look at each other, and it's like this at his desk, just frozen. I was like, right, we've got to go. Bob started the track. So we both pull an ear out. Bob's on my left. I pull an ear out so I can hear Bob. Bob pulls an ear out so he can hear my amp. I turn it up. We just get going and go. We know what we're doing.
Just rock.
Let's just go for it. So we had to go. But the level of concentration through all of it was such that I remember virtually nothing of the hour on stage, because I was so intensely concentrating on being in time. I think it was about third song in, the monitors came back to life. So it got solved, but that curveball. And then Cee-Lo's up there in front of us, and he was just incredible, pitch perfect. You know, awesome. You can tell he was brought up as a church musician. His pitching's incredible, and his vocals are sensational. But we're sitting there playing, and he turns. I remember one time he turns around and looks at us, and he's kind of facing the audience, and he just turns his head and looks at us and just sort of stares like this. And I was sitting there thinking, is that a good stare? Is that a bad stare? Is that an I'm digging it stare? I've got no rapport with you. I've no idea if this is... couldn't tell you. I've just got to smile and get on with it. It turns out he really enjoyed the gig and had fun.
And you toured, and you ended up touring for months.
Yeah, I ended up working for about a year with him.
Yeah.
But that first show, like I said, the most amazing thing was the first time 250,000 people are meeting Cee-Lo. It's the first time the band are meeting Cee-Lo. Awesome. And those are the details that you wouldn't expect from a headline.
But to your point, that's why, and I don't know who put that together, and Bob's been on the show. We didn't
that
go
was
into that
Bob,
story. Yeah, but, you know, that is about picking the right people for the right jobs.
Absolutely.
and being absolute consummate professional and knowing what to do when shit hits the fan.
But I will just finish that little story off by circling back. So during Forget You, he did remember not to use any expletives down the microphone. Of course, during the line when that part was sung, all he did was, instead of singing it, threw it to the audience and had 250,000 people sing back.
Yeah, backfire.
So it definitely went out live worldwide.
That's cool. We're coming towards the end here, guys. So Duncan, we can talk about COVID if that is your answer. But yeah, toughest time in your career where you've either thought, I'm not sure if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to do this anymore, and how you sort of dealt with that.
There was a period after I first left the Soul Circus, and I decided I was going to make a go of it on my own, freelancing stuff. Yes. And the 3 out of the 4 projects that I didn't work out. 2 of them were circuses. One of them was a sporting venture, and it was, when you're in it, it's like the end of the world, right? You think, oh my God, everybody. Another show's gone bankrupt, and then okay, we're going to do this one, and then this one goes bankrupt, and it doesn't sell any tickets, and selling tickets is hard, and it really is. And when you start your career, a lot of people start their career and don't understand how hard it is to sell tickets to the public, to get them to part with their money to come and see what you're doing on a regular basis. And these shows that you start with when you're young usually are pretty well established and can lull you into this false sense of security. But when you start learning the business, and I think that was what happened to me. I'd been in a couple of different shows that were all good, that been established, and then okay, I can do this, and you go off with people that may or may not know what they're doing, and I probably didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but it was certainly a big learning experience for me. And you were saying earlier about learning how the back end of a production works. What makes it tick. But equally important to that, I think, is learning the business. How does the money work in your business? Because without the ticket sales, without the revenue, none of us have jobs, right? None of us. And that's what drives everything. And there's such a lack of awareness in our business about that. And I think that the tough times that I had really sort of taught me about that. It's like, okay, yeah, it's great having a great time doing show business, but if nobody's buying tickets, we're not going to be doing this very long. And when shows close and you feel the reality of that, and you're like sitting at home going, okay, now what am I going to do? It really, drove me to learn the business side of our business. And that's when I sort of started hitting new levels in my career. I was able to take positions where you start talking about strategy instead of just, a day-to-day operation. Yep. And that puts you into a different level of seniority and sort of executive status. So it was very difficult. I spent three years on shows that just didn't work. And of course, when shows don't work, you don't get paid, you don't have any money, you don't pay your mortgage, all that kind of stuff that goes along with it, until I ended up actually getting involved with a festival that kind of got me back on track. And then I went to Cavalier. But I think that experience working with shows that didn't work put me in much better stead to work on these bigger things afterwards, because I really understood the gravity of what has to be done from a business aspect.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for the honesty and openness. And just quickly, what got you to that Cavalier or the festival offer? Like, what, I know most people, myself included, after the second failure, let alone third one, or, would go, right, time to go find a new job or go, get a desk job or whatever. Was it just hardcore resilience? Was it blind faith that you knew you had something to offer? What actually got you to that final place where you were back feeling on top?
Well, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It was the network that I had built up. I'd been very intentional about meeting people. And the festival that I did, which was actually for the 100th anniversary of the invention of flight. So it was a huge government-sponsored festival.
That. Very cool.
And I was the director of operations for that. And I got that through a guy that I'd met when I was working at the Soul Circus, who had a production company that specialized more in indoor events, did huge indoor events and conventions, but got this job to do the festival and didn't really have anybody who knew the outside element of it. So he called me, and that got me back working again after those failures. And then Cavalier, again, the first tour director of Cavalier was somebody that I'd worked with previously and said, we've got some issues over here. Can you come solve them? Which I did and stayed for 12 years.
Yeah, that's like everyone I've interviewed on this podcast, which is why I love it, has said it's the support network and obviously the cliche of not burning bridges and being gracious and professional and kind throughout all stages of your career, because you never know when that person's going to call you and go, oh, I've got something that only you could help me with. So giving me a bit of goosebumps there. I like that. Neil, similar question, I guess. Have you ever gone, might be time to go start, delivering pizzas, or I don't know, like considering something else, or times have been to that point? I know you've been consistently working with Kim for 20 years, and she's got such a great consistent career. But yeah, any times of doubt or fear or anything like that?
I mean, it's a tricky one. Musicians especially can feel, I think, like they're at the kind of the bottom of the food chain a lot of the time. And when you take into account the sort of the big picture of how the whole operation runs, and it's, I think there was an article in the BBC about this actually, where it wasn't uncommon to have people that were playing these enormous arenas, and then on the weekends they're working in Pizza Express serving, pizzas. It's doing one thing to help make ends meet so that you can continue to pursue your passion. And I guess that's why I've always been open to trying lots of other things. I sort of ended up falling into tour management, I guess, in my late 20s for a bit. And I got, this was one artist I was working with where the tour manager got dishonorably dismissed because they were cheating the books. And unfortunately, when the record company found out, they said, well, look, Neil, you're the MD of this group already, and you've already solved lots of problems. How, do you think you could do some of these things? And of course, young and eager, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot, see what happens. And of course, that was a horrendous learning curve, because there's, you quickly work out that tour management is not just a fancy title. There's a lot of book work. There's making everyone happy. There's making sure people get paid. There's making sure there's contingency money.
Basically security as well.
And the logistics of not just the logistics of all the equipment moving, but just musicians. Someone said to me, it's like herding cats.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you try and get 20 musicians onto a plane to leave. They literally do this. Yeah. There's so much more to it. And I ended up, you remember, Zarif Davidson.
Yeah,
was
just talking
fantastic
to Zarif yesterday.
So I started, after that artist that I worked with, RCA, who was a subsidiary of Sony, said to me, we've got this artist, Zarif. She was signed at around the same time as Jessie J.
Yeah.
And they said to me, we'd like you to now do some tour management for Zarif. And we ended up doing, we did quite a few big tours, but the biggest one was probably the I Am Beyonce tour for UK and Europe.
For Beyonce,
yeah. And that was a real, right, here you are, you've arrived at some top level stuff. Even though it was, a support tour, there was still a lot of work involved and for me, and a lot of learning, and again the business side, the budgeting, arguing with tour accountants at the label, because this is just when a lot of the labels had kind of dispersed and reformed these 360 deals, and they were firing a lot of accountants and then hiring them as freelancers. So you had a whole new fight with these people that were getting commissions based on how much they were saving. So, that's a whole other topic.
That's a whole other episode.
But if I got to this point where it was like, I've learned so much, I've enjoyed it, but this is now tiring me to the point to where I'm going further away from the thing, the passion that got me into this, which was me as a Neil the musician. And I had this crossroads where it's like, I can dig into this. At the time, I'd been approached by Tour Pro's JP at Tour Pro, who was looking after Rihanna. He said to me, it was actually, he called me in and he said, look, Neil, do you want to come and work for me? And I remember in that meeting saying, I love JP. I said to him at the time, I'm right at this crossroads, and this is a horrible decision to make because I know where I could go and what I could do, but unfortunately there's this big part of me that still feels like I've got more to fulfill as a musician. So I'm going to do it, but I don't regret anything I did. And in terms of understanding the business as a whole, and even moving forward in my own job with artists or different artists, when especially when like our current tour manager, who's fairly new to the Kim thing, he'll say things to me and he'll be quite shocked when I'll come back with answers that he's not expecting that I am. And now sometimes he leans on me a little just from experience. But again, that's a sign of when you've got someone that's great in the job, that they're not too proud to turn around and say, Neil, you've done this before. What did you do when this situation shows up? So when you're around a good team. There were moments, and I do wonder what would have happened if I'd gone the other way.
And you do, and your back end support for Song Division is incredible. But I think we're all very grateful you made that decision, mate. Guys, real quick, shameless plugs because it's my favorite phrase. Duncan, you're in the corporate speaking world now. How can people contact you? But what do you speak about? Is it your story and how you've married the performance and the operations side of your career?
Yeah, so I've my keynote that I'm delivering right now is why you should run your business like a circus.
Love it. That's what you did at IMEX.
Great.
It was. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, and I'm still leaning into that. People. Circus is such a negative, used as a negative metaphor these days. That's a circus. This is a circus. But you know what? It's one of the most organized places in the world. So I talk about how we build chemistry in teams, how we use creativity in not just the stage show, but the operations. And then, of course, the most important thing, which is customer experience. So talking a lot about that. And you can always get me at duncanjfisher.com.
Too easy, and connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm sure you wouldn't mind people reaching out.
Absolutely. Follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm posting my I won't call it nonsense, but my journey every week. Yeah.
I love it. Neil, you got I think you're midway through a new Kim album. Did you say before?
Yeah, there's a new one where we've just kind of we're sort of at the beginning, but a lot of it's been written, and there's now all the recordings going to be starting. But there'll be a new the singles tour will be next year, big UK tour, nice. And then the German tour following that, which is kind of our home from home, Kim's main territory.
She's huge in Germany.
Yeah, that was always our biggest territory. She's the Germans love their rock. What can I say? Happy to go there.
Yeah.
You can always catch me. My Instagram handle is Neil Jones Guitar. So anywhere you want to catch me, we'll be there. Yeah.
You're chatting. All right. Well, guys, I knew I'd enjoy this one, and it's been I've loved it. So thank you both for your time, Duncan, especially you, in the sense that we don't know each other well, and I really appreciate you jumping on. Neil, thank you for putting up with me for the last 12 years.
Always a pleasure.
You're the man. Absolute beautiful guitarist and human being. You're both legends. It's been great. Thank you for listening, everyone. See you next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
That was great.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You piece of shit.
Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Hurry up and watch me fall.